Hey everybody, welcome back to Electric Cafe. Today's video is on Roxy Music's 1979 album, Manifesto. This was their sixth album and first album since 1975, so they had, five albums pretty much all within about four to 5 years. And then they took a break, and this is kind of their comeback album in some ways. And then Flesh and Blood came out, and then Avalon came out, and then they called it a career and split up. So they're splitting up 2 years after. So it's an interesting album because you can kind of tell this album it's a good album. Um, it works on a lot of levels as far as again they haven't been playing together for 4 years, so you can still see that they enjoy playing with each other. Like, some people think that maybe Brian Ferry became too solo. He did a couple solo albums in between, and he started taking the lead. I don't know if that's egotistical, or he just feels like he's a star, or he's sticking out, or he thinks he can do himself, or it's causing rifts in the band. Of course, Brian Eno left early on because of the direction of the album, of the band. And so, you're starting to see some cracks in the surface, maybe on this album, but they're kind of covered up because you can tell that they enjoy still playing with each other. Flesh and Bud, you can kind of see it's kind of getting a little bit thin, and then Avalon feels like it's a great album, but it sort of feels more like a Brian Ferry album than really a Roxy Music album. But it's they're such great musicians. They're still able to cover maybe some of the holes and some of the issues that the band was having. So yeah, I'm gonna do a review on this album. I'm gonna review the songs, give them a score, and then individually, and then give the overall album a score. Again, this is their sixth album, Manifesto, from 1979. So the first track is the title track, Manifesto. I really like the bass, edgy. Um, One thing about this album, I'll say so now, is they do a good job of mixing other genres that are going on at the time into their sound. So obviously they have some disco influences here. It's 1979. They do a good job of blending that in. New wave is becoming popular, right? Blondie and Talking Heads, and everything from Elvis Costello to I don't know, so many things in the late '70s. Even the Police or something like that, or ska music coming on board. It's just there's a lot of influences in 1979, and they do a good job of sort of mixing in a little new wave in this song. And there's some songs that kind of delve into it, a little bit of a disco, and so they do a good job of kind of mixing in some sounds, some styles into their sounds and style, and still feeling like it's traditional, although slightly updated Roxy Music sound. I feel like this album is successful in doing that. Now, are the songs themselves really good, great? I don't, I wouldn't go there. Um, there's a little bit of old kind of rock and roll that Brian Ferry has kind of influenced, and I feel like kind of retracts from the band, from the progress and the potential that the band has. I don't like when Brian Ferry kind of does these covers of old Bob Dylan songs, or like Wilson Pickett, or a lot of his covers, a lot of his influence, and it's granted a lot of his, he's into a lot of soul and rock sounds from the late '50s and early '60s. I mean, he comes from that generation, and but I don't feel like him doing his version of that is beneficial to the band, especially at album number 6 in 1979. I get it, early in the career, some of that rock still kind of fits in and stuff like that. But in '79, I mean, songs like Cry, 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 and Ain't That So just sound really dated. And even for the time, I can imagine they must have sound dated because they just sound like old rock and roll songs, and they just like if there's a futureness and a glam and a updated and a sort of new wave sound that they could have sort of progressed to. I think that and then they did a little bit of that on this album and Flesh and Blood to an extent that could have been the future of the band and even though they're 8, 9, 10 years into their band, they could have still progressed into that. It would have been interesting. It's definitely a good thing that Roxy Music broke up, so they didn't do some stinkers in the middle '80s because it could have been bad, But um, it'd been interesting to see how they sort of progressed through the '80s. I don't know if it would have been good. So it's probably a good thing that they did break up, but there could have been some opportunity there to go a little bit more futuristic, go more. I wouldn't say into disco, although that was successful too. Just Manifesto has some edgy new wave sound to it. The title track. Um, it's almost an all instrumental song. It only has sort of one chorus and a verse, so it feels like it ends kind of short. The song and um, doesn't necessarily. Excuse me. Um, I feel like I'm coming down with cold a little bit. Allergies. It's really strange. The weather's kind of got cold all of a sudden. Like the last day. I think it got down to like 37 last night. This has been the coldest day so far this new fall. Um, but I feel like Manifesto it doesn't really finish or it doesn't climax. It's still a good song. And it has and the depth of the first half is really strong, especially. I got 2.25 stars, so it's a good song. Trash. This was a single. It sort of has a punk feel to it. Pretty good. Little too short. I got 2 stars, but again I reward them. Not really rewarded them in the score of that song, but I give them benefit of the doubt. They did a disco song. They're doing a new wave song, and Trash sort of has a little bit of punk to it, in a Roxy Music way, and it's successful. And so you gotta hand it to them for trying some new songs. Case in point, number 3, Angel Eyes. I do like the disco version a little bit better than the album version. It misses the cool guitar and that hook and even the saxophone to an extent. Still a really good song, 2.75 stars. But I feel like I would give the remix, the disco version, probably 3.25 stars, maybe even up to 3.5. I do like the disco version a lot better than the album version, but the album version is kind of cool in its own way as well. But I could give this 3 stars. I'm kind of on the edge about it, but 2.75. I'm not gonna, you know, get upset over a quarter star, but I do feel like it could be a very good song. But again, I like the disco version a little bit better, and I definitely would say that's a very good song. But this one is just not quite there for me, but very close. Track 4, Still Falls the Rain. This is kind of vintage Roxy Music sound. It sounds a little bit like the Beatles. It's a good song too. 2.5 stars. And then my favorite song on the album, or my second favorite song on the album, Stronger Through the Years. I really like the bass line, the really cool guitar. I like the piano. It's got some effects on the song as well. This song has the depth that I'm looking for in a Roxy Music album. Um, excuse me. When I think of like Avalon and things like that, the songs themselves have some depth to them, musically, production wise. Um, but this song is really good. Stronger Through the Years. I really like it. It's 3.5 stars. Ain't That So? Talked about this a little earlier. It's got a decent sound. Sort of sounds like a jam band. It's too long though too. It kind of starts out kind of basic, but it's too long and too average. Too Just it's just okay. I gave it 1 star. My little girl. It's a cool groove, cool riff, kind of a short song. I have it 2.5 stars. And then my favorite song on the album, "Dance Away," classic Roxy music sound. Everything is strong here. Ballad, good chorus. Some people might think a little cheesy, but it's if you like Brian Fairley's solo stuff, it sounds like Brian. It sounds like a Brian Ferry solo song for sure. It sounds like Avalon or More Than This or Slave to Love, or you know what I mean. It just kind of has that kind of Brian Ferry solo sound. I gave it 3.75 stars. And then Cry Cry Cry. Again, this is kind of the style I don't like from Roxy music. The more traditional rocks, it's kind of got a little bit of a glam sort of uh, edge to their rock, but I'm not a big fan of a lot of the early Roxy music hits. Like on Country Life and Pleasure. Just I think of especially the first two albums. I mean, I really like like the Heartache song. The Atmosphere, because Brian Eno does some good Moog synthesizer stuff on some of those songs, some cool spacey sounds and stuff like that. But without his stuff, when he's not on the songs, I don't know. Just some of the it just I don't know. Some of the early Roxy music just doesn't. It's okay. It's just a lot of it is okay, and this is a good version of that. Um, but then again, like "Love Is a Drug" is a good version of that's their style that I don't like, but it is a good song. Um, "Spin Me Round." Oh, "Cry Cry Cry," I got 1 star. "Spin Me Round" ends the album on a strong note. It's pretty simple, but I like the sounds. The pacing stays in the sweet spot. Really good track. 3.25 stars. It's actually my third favorite song on the album. "Dance Away," "Stronger Through the Years," and "Spin Me Around" are my three favorite songs on the album. So the good. A few classics on the album for sure. "Dance Away," "Angel Eyes" is a good song, even if it's not the version I necessarily like the most. A few very good supporting songs: "Stronger Through the Years," "Manifesto," "Spin Me Around." Again, does a really good job of embracing new styles, disco, new wave, and even punk, while still being a Roxy music album. Strongly engineered, which is no surprise. Mastered well, which is a hallmark of Roxy music albums. They're always produced really well, engineered really well, mastered really well, mixed really well. You know, not necessarily my favorite cover. Probably my least favorite cover. I'd rather. It's an interesting cover. It is kind of disco. It is kind of. It's kind of cool to look at. But it is. But when you look at it quickly, it's kind of an eyesore. But it's kind of a party feel. Look like a New Year's Eve party or something like that. 1979. So I get it. It's cool, but is it as iconic as the other Roxy music albums covers? Not at all. Not at all. I'd much rather see a beautiful girl on the cover than mannequins at a New Year's Eve party. Um, as far as the opportunities on the album cover, um, but a couple of okay tracks again, that kind of vintage rock and roll sound that I think makes them suffer. "Cry Cry Cry" and "Ain't It So." Depending on your view on how harsh, you know, that kind of probably will make up your mind on your score on this record as well, depending on how you feel about those two tracks and about how you feel about Roxy Music's earlier career. I tend to like the later Roxy music. Obviously, Avalon's my favorite, but I like Flesh and Blood. I like Manifesto, and I like Siren. The last four albums are my favorite when it comes to Roxy music. Um, uh, 1979 was definitely a time of change for sure in music, and I think they succeeded again in not going overboard with those sounds, but hinting at them and doing one song sort of per style. There's one that's new wave, there's one sort of punk, and there's sort of a disco one with Angel Eyes. So again, I feel like they did a good job of that. When I add up the stars, 24 and a half stars divided by 10 songs is 2.45, so that's right around um, just under 60 as a score. But I kind of pushed it over a little bit on that. Um, I pushed it up to 62 out of 100, so I feel it's on the low side of a good album. It's a good album for sure. I definitely wouldn't say it's a very good album, and I think it's better than okay. So I feel pretty confident in giving it a good score at 62. So that's my review of the album. Curious if you have a favorite song on here, or what would you rate this album? And considering the first, what is this? Considering, was it 9 albums they have? Right? 7, 8 albums? Where would you rank this on the top 8 albums by Roxy Music? For me, I would probably have it around like 5. 4 or 5. Probably 5. I think probably my fifth. But, we'll see when I rate the other albums, but probably around number 5. All right, thanks so much for watching.